As a follow-up to our documentary on the brutal killing of George Smoot, a San Francisco gay man, Allen McClain reports on the latest developments in this case.
8 weeks ago, the Office of Citizens' Complaints, the civilian review agency of the San Francisco Police Department, headed by Director Michael Langer, sustained 3 complaints against members of the police department filed by Bill Paul, president of the Stonewall Gay Democratic Club. Allegation number 1, 4 top police inspectors were accused of conducting an inadequate investigation into the killing of George Smoot. Witnesses were not interviewed. Physical evidence was not collected. The charges were sustained.
There was no physical evidence introduced at all. There was no broken furniture. There was no hair, fibers from clothing or hair. Like in rape trials, if there's any altercation or fights or struggle, they can find hair, fibers, and they check for that. They didn't do that.
It was this girl's testimony.
It was this girl's testimony. We 3 of us met with Arlo Smith the day before the trial, and we asked Arlo and his top homicide chief to postpone the trial so that we could review the procedures. We were concerned that they hadn't done a thorough investigation. And they said that they based their decision on prosecution on the sister's story. When we went to court and heard the sister's story, we got really upset because the story was so filled with holes.
3 days after the murder, or 4 days, I don't recall the exact date, I was contacted by 2 people who were very, very concerned about George Smoot being murdered in his neighborhood by somebody who was known to him. The problem that the friends and neighbors had was that they felt that, or could not understand why the police had not talked to more of the neighbors than they had about the incident. There was no proof, there were no witnesses that heard the so-called screaming when George Smoot went to the house of the juvenile and supposedly a struggle took place. None of the neighbors heard any screaming, even though the front door was open.
During the trial, they gave a description, the brother did, about how Smoot was fighting with the brother. They were holding each other's necks. Both were holding each other's necks. There was no questions at all about, did you try to scratch him? Did you just hold the necks? Did you ever punch him? Did you use your legs? Did you tumble? Did you kick? They didn't ask any of those questions. No questions about, did you knock over furniture? Did you rip his shirt? Was he pressing you hard? Were you pressing him hard? Did you fear for your life? There were no bruises or scratches on the sister, on the boy who killed Smoot, or on Smoot.
Allegation number 3. Police in George Smoot's home were accused of laughter at the scene of a murder, which reflects discredit on the police department. The charges were sustained.
That's why I'm particularly disturbed at the accounts of the neighbors that there was laughter going through this house. Granted, there were visual presentations of male beauty to be found here, unabashedly. He was an out-front gay man. That didn't stop the neighbors from admiring his competence in transforming this house, or the neighbors admiring his articulateness on a great number of issues, which he was always ready to bend your ear with. He was a man of very strong feeling and passion, and he was admired for that, for his integrity. So for our men in blue to find amusement in what someone else found pleasure and beauty in was very, very disturbing to me. Just the very fact that this house was ransacked, searched, and the murderer's house was apparently not even investigated, it raises a very serious question.
I certainly have no problems if, in fact, the police, if it can be proved that the police were the ones who were laughing and for whatever reason, and if, in fact, the reason was because they weren't taking it seriously, I think I'm going to be in the forefront to see that the officers are severely reprimanded in whatever way for doing that.
Allegation number 4. That the laughter and inadequate investigation were a result of the fact that George Smoot was gay. the charges were sustained.
This is an example of a breakdown of the system at all three levels: the police, the district attorney, and the court, the judge. We cannot take anything for granted ever at this point in time. Any incident that involves gay people needs to be double-checked. Don't assume that something happened. Don't count on the people that are doing things to do it in a professional way.
These findings have now gone to Police Chief Frank Jordan's office for disciplinary action. John Crew, an attorney for the American Civil Liberties Union, who has been following the Smoot case since the beginning, explains how the disciplinary procedures work.
Now, there are basically four things that can happen from here. One, the chief potentially could decide that he is not going to take any disciplinary action in this case. The chief does not have authority to change the OCC's findings, the findings that these officers did engage in misconduct, but he does have the authority, assuming the commission doesn't stop him, to say that we're not going to take any disciplinary action. Secondly, the chief, if he chooses to discipline these officers with anything less than a 10-day suspension, a reprimand or a 5-day suspension, then he has the authority to do that, and the officers have a right to request a hearing, a more informal hearing, just in front of the chief. The third option is the chief could choose to take this case to the police commission for a full disciplinary trial. Normally, that would mean that the chief would be seeking more than a 10-day suspension, up to 90 days off, or termination from the department. But also, there's some cases where the chief can just choose that it's more appropriate for the police commission to handle the trial. The final option involves the commission. The police commission in San Francisco is the governing body both for the police department and the OCC, and they have basically total authority over both institutions. They are the ones that hire the chief, hire the director of the OCC, and they have complete authority to manage both departments and agencies. And pursuant to that authority, if they chose to exercise it, we believe the police commission could take this case from the department and insist that regardless of how much discipline may result, that they would like a disciplinary trial before the commission.
The Office of Citizens' Complaints has sustained the worst of the charges against the police department. Chief of Police Frank Jordan's response must be firm. However, due to the seriousness of the charges, the police commission should hold public hearings, both to remind officers that homophobia will not be tolerated and to demonstrate that this police commission, newly appointed by Mayor Agnos, who removed its only gay member, will truly, as the mayor has stated, represent the broad diversity of this city and ensure justice for all San Francisco citizens.
Thank you for joining us this evening. We intend to respond to all of your letters and comments. Your interest in our program is greatly appreciated. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Good night. Tonight's program will be rebroadcast on Thursday, October 6th. Our October 20th program will focus on the upcoming November election. In addition, we will look at those corporations who donated to the San Francisco AIDS Walk and at the same time gave money to re-elect William Dannemeyer. That's coming up October 20th.